Welcome to Reformgelical, where the Reformed and Evangelicals meet. My name is Matt Williams. I am co-hosted by A.D. Robles. A.D., how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic.
You would be doing fantastic as a Federal Vision guy. I've been hearing that word. Yeah, I know you are Federal Vision. And you know who else is? Beth Moore. She's a Federal Visionist as well.
I don't like her, so clearly Federal Vision.
I've been hearing that term bounced around all week long.
Yes.
And I have no idea what it means.
Hey, listen, I've read a lot of Federal Vision stuff in my lifetime, and some of it I wish I never read. But I think the reality is that you can be sure of one thing. If somebody is doing something or saying something that is, in your opinion, is not biblical, it is clearly the influence of Federal Vision.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I am going to start just labeling everyone on social media I don't agree with Federal Vision.
Yeah.
And it's going to make the internet explode because no one really knows what it means. And they're going to be all self-conscious. You're going to be scared of tweeting. Like, is someone going to think I'm in Federal Vision for this? They will.
It's like the new, like a lot of times people will say that, if something they don't like about your theology is, they'll say it's Catholic. It's like that's the influence of Catholicism. You have to fully reform. You have to fully be Protestant. I think the new thing in the new future, it's going to be Federal Vision.
Yeah.
Good for them.
Good. Yeah. If you want to hear more about our Federal Vision, you can find us on YouTube. We have a Twitter account, Facebook account. Please give us a follow, Reformgelical, like a lot of you have. Welcome to all those watching live and putting up with this nonsense of ours. You can subscribe on iTunes and all the other great places that we are on. Make sure that you tweet at AD Robles to make him come on Twitter and join the fun, because he's just being stubborn about it. Let's be honest.
I did a retweet today.
You did. I almost had to institute church discipline for your lack of retweeting our shows.
I retweeted something today, so that's okay.
And so thank you for everyone who is supporting us. All right, let's get into it. We got a bunch of articles I want to go through today, and I was just doing my show prep beforehand, and I was getting to one that we're going to get to in a little bit. And I just thought I'm going to get in trouble, and I'm going to need AD's wisdom to make sure that I don't say anything that is going to get me banned from Twitter. Like some people have. Some people have been just dropping off of Twitter late. It's really sad. Need you to fill the gap.
I'm one of them, so I can't really say anything about it.
And somehow you have like 4 times more followers than I do. How the heck does that even happen?
I used to be a lot more active. That's in all fairness to you. I used to tweet and say all kinds of crazy things on there. Now I'm just a big teddy bear.
That makes me feel better. I was like crying. I'm like, I try so hard, and AD doesn't even tweet, and he has that many more followers. What am I doing wrong?
Yeah, well, don't follow my example. I used to get in trouble all the
time. I feel like we need to get in trouble as Christians, or we're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
On that note, let's jump in. I was reading this article that was absolutely interesting, that the atheist Richard Dawkins, who I've heard debate, hear trash talk Christians so many times, saying getting rid of God would make the world less moral. And there's a lot of ways that we can go with this, but I think one of them that just stands out to me is I don't think the world's moral at all anyways. So I don't think we're moral people, and I think my fellow Calvinists, correct me if I'm wrong, can get on board with that, right?
Well, I yes, I can. So I want to start there, but I actually do think that there is a kind of morality that most people acknowledge, and it's basically upside down morality. So basically, the opposite of what is actually good is called good. And if you don't accept it, then you're bad. So it's not that there's no morality. It's that it's topsy-turvy. It's inverted morality. It's upside down morality. And that's way worse.
Yeah, because there's no foundation. And that's how you got your Twitter following that you got. But in the article, Dawkins says he insisted that if religion were to be abolished, it would give people a license to do really bad things. And the thing that just struck me on this is according to who? And I love my, apologia brothers who always use, what is the type of apologetics that they use? Presuppositionalism, yes. Yeah. And sometimes they use it to almost to an annoying sense. I'm just going to be honest about that. But I love it.
So is this what you mean by getting into trouble?
No, but I figured I might as well just dive in right now.
I kind of do agree with you, but we'll talk. So
okay,
keep going.
Okay, we can get in trouble now if you want. You want to wait a little bit? Oh, okay.
I like to wait. Yes.
But it's just so funny because this guy, he's a really smart scientist. And I think this article just makes him look so silly in so many ways. But one of them is who determines what is bad? Like, is it bad that you just killed that insect on screen?
Yeah, you saw that?
I did. That was great.
I think I might have missed him. But anyway, yeah, is it bad? Well, this is the thing. Like this is what I talk about upside down morality. Like there's still sort of a foundation of, like, Richard Dawkins still to this day would blush to say, well, you should still be able to kill people. Like, he would blush to say that, but his idea of what a person is upside down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so there's still there's some semblance of morality there, but in the details, that's where the devil is. The devil is in the details. In the details, it's upside down. Always. It always is. Mm-hmm. And we've seen this week, and I don't want to interrupt you, but we saw this week, or last week rather, a father, desperate to save his son from being turned into a girl with hormones and stuff like this. And if you say anything about this, and listen, this is the reality. Like, if you say something about this, you're the bigot. You're the evil one. And it's like I don't care if you call me evil. Like, I'm not. Don't feel sorry for me because people think I'm evil for saying that is insanity, and that woman is a psychopath. And this kid is likely, I mean, if you look at the statistics, he's likely to off himself by the time he's 30 because of these decisions that are happening here. Mm-hmm. It's grotesque. It's evil. It will ruin this child. You might as well go throw yourself into the ocean and drown and die rather than do this. But if you say something like that, you're the one that needs to take a step back. And it's like, that's upside down.
Right.
We all would say we should protect children, but if you can say you should protect children at the same time say, well, yeah, that child, he's transgender, so he should get those hormones, you're upside down. Mm-hmm. You have a morality. It's just the inverse of what actual morality is.
It's totally perverted. And it's
perverted is a great word.
Yeah, it really is. And it's sad because we are even seeing that in the church today too, and like creeping in with some of their ideologies. It's like there's these skewed, perverted points of justice, and well, we'll save that for later. But another thing that really struck me, I'm trying to pace myself with getting in trouble here. Another thing that struck me in this article that I think just makes Dawkins look crazy is this revelation came to him not from common sense or from, reading the scriptures, but it came from a study called Outgrowing God. And it was done by Melissa Batson in the University of Newcastle. So she's probably British. And what she did was she let people put in the amount of money that they thought they should pay for a drink. And when she replaced a flower image with ominous eyes, they put in 3 times as much. This is the study that Richard Dawkins is citing to determine that people need God to be more moral. That's a study. That's reputable. And I just was like,
she probably made some money on that study too.
I know. Let's be honest. Government
she probably got. Yeah, it's definitely government funded. She probably got some good funding for that.
Yeah, I know private sector companies funding that. I'll tell you that right now.
Yes. And you don't need to be an authority on business to know that.
I would love to go into a CEO's office and be like, hey, okay, I got this idea. I'm going to put a picture of a flower and then ominous eyes. And we're going to see how much money that they want to pay for a drink. Like, what company would do that? But anyways, but I just want to kind of give a fellow Christians some boldness here, because the humanist religion and their priests, these people, Richard Dawkins and other scientists that are trying to make a mockery of God, are using these studies to determine morality. How foolish is this? Like, we should have the most confidence and boldness in our foundation with the word of God. It is much more sound and much more wise and much more beneficial than studies like this.
Yeah, Matt, I did. So just for all the viewers out there and the people that are, listening to this right now and will listen to it in the future, me and Matt talk about the general sense of what we're going to discuss beforehand. So we have an outline. We know that. I didn't know you were going to say that, Matt, but let me say this. Like, a lot of people will say stuff like this. Like, well, Adam, you have a lot of harsh opinions. You have a lot of like definitive views on morality. What if you're wrong? What if you're wrong? Like, it's dangerous, man. It's dangerous. And I'm like, okay, let's just get this straight. What you're saying is that I shouldn't say, the things that I say, and it's too dangerous, but yet what is being proposed out there is stuff like this, where we can have this bogus, ridiculous study to decide what's what. We can pump a little child full of hormones to become a woman when he's actually a boy. That's not dangerous. That's not too dangerous. We can have library sessions where pedophiles come in and strip for the kids. That's not too dangerous. But the fact that you're pointing it out and saying that it is dangerous, that's actually what's too dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
We should not be bashful at all. Like, seriously, I don't, when I say this kind of stuff, and sometimes I'll admit, sometimes I express a little bit of anger, but at the same time, like, don't feel sorry for me. Like, I don't feel sorry for saying the truth. I don't feel sorry for being that little kid who says, the king doesn't have any clothes on. Like, I don't feel sorry for myself for that. Like, it's very easy to live a life like this, where all you have to do is say, yeah, Bruce Jenner's a man. Like, that's easy to do.
Yeah.
You don't have, there's no, the only thing that's wrong, like that's troubling about that is, like, other people might think I'm not couth. But like that's very minimal compared to the torment and the pain and the anxiety of trying to force yourself to think that Bruce Jenner is a woman. Like, nobody believes that Bruce Jenner is a woman except for crazy people. And if you're crazy, then you can't understand what I'm saying anyway. So who cares? But like, nobody actually believes that. So the people that are saying that, they're like amping themselves up every time. Anxiety, like blood pressure probably rises. Like, it's probably a very difficult life. Don't feel sorry for me. Like, I get angry about this sometimes. I probably shouldn't, because it's just like, I have no control over it. If you want to be crazy, then go ahead and be crazy. This is not hard. Like that study is like, you want to spend money on that? I mean, it's up to you. More real money for me, I guess.
But not just spend money, but then leverage it to justify philosophical arguments.
Right. Well, yeah, and that's actually a bigger cost in the end.
Yeah, it is. And I'm supposed to feel bad that I believe God could create the world in 6 days.
In 6 days. Yeah, you're supposed to feel bad for that.
Yeah.
This is the easiest thing to believe. Like, honestly, like, I seriously just hear it all laid out for a second, right? What is more difficult to believe? God created the world, an all-knowing, all-powerful God created the world in 6 days. He saw that it was good, and he gave it to us. Or that over billions and billions and billions of years, through forces that had nothing in mind, somehow these inner pieces of matter kind of came together, and somehow they became self-aware, and they became organic, and over billions of years, by the way. And now here we are, and we're talking about this on a video screen that somehow we've created, even though at the end of the day, we're just inert, like sort of pieces of, I mean, we're basically rocks that have evolved over billions of years into now. Mm-hmm. We could have just as easily become carrots. Yes. That's hard to believe. That is very hard to believe. It's stupid to believe that, I think.
Yeah, I would think so. And what's crazy about it is that theory has less evidence than this study that we're talking about.
Not to mention the fact that a lot of people do admit that this theory is preposterous. And so a lot of people now say that we were seeded by aliens, like aliens put life here, because there has to be an intelligence that did it. But obviously, most people that can think for a little bit deeper can think, well, okay, well, then who made the aliens?
Right.
And it just pushes it back another step. This doesn't help you. What I mean? So there's no embarrassment for believing that the earth was created in 6 days by a God who loved us and wanted us to be here, and this is why we're here.
Yeah, seriously, like it's such a deceptive thing, because honestly, I'm not saying that I've been bold every time. Like, I've kind of been skirmish with those theories, talking to educated people, and you go into academia and things like that. But just like we're going to someday look at Satan and mock him and be like, is this the person that deceived the nations? That's how these theories are. And just a matter of time before you say, did people really be deceived by this that everything that we know is the size of a pin drop that spun really fast and broke up into all of this stuff? It's insane. If you just take the idea out of an education, academia, all the smart scientists agree, and you just think about it from common sense, it's insane.
That's right. I agree.
You want to know a fun fact about Bruce Jenner, though? He's Federal Vision.
Well, I guess then that settles it.
No, but you know what is actually really crazy about that? Kanye West is in his family.
Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it?
That is really interesting. That is not my original thought. I saw that on Twitter.
Yeah, I did kind of know that, but I haven't thought about it in a long time.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see the gospel spread through that family. I think it could do amazing things. Yeah, but going back to good old Richard Dawkins, and kind of going back to the anger that we were talking about, I was wondering why he gets so mad. He's saying, I just hate the idea that this is true, that we need a God for morality. I hate it. And this proves what the Bible says, that he knows God exists and doesn't want to acknowledge it. And that's where this anger comes from. He is upset that he is losing an argument. And this goes to the alien thing as well. Like, they will try anything they can to not admit that God is sovereign.
Yeah, I think it's like, it's more that he's frustrated that man can't be autonomous. Like, we can't have everything and be just, powerful in ourselves. Like, because he's aware, like Dawkins is interesting, because he was one of the first sort of like these, like, atheists that were popular that I have ever read after I became a Christian. And I remember reading his arguments. Yeah, like a rock star atheist, right? But he was always kind of one of the most honest that I ever read as well, where he's like, well, like, yeah, I mean, what's the difference? I mean, there's really not much difference between a human and a pig. And like, he doesn't want to believe that, but he has to, sort of. And it really pisses him off that he has to believe that there's no difference between a human being and a pig. And he's also got in trouble for saying things about, like, how, mild pedophilia is not that big a deal. I mean, at the end of the day, like, he said stuff like that before, and he gets ridiculed for that, rightfully so. But he has to, given his beliefs. And it kind of angers him that he has to do that, because he wants to be able to just have no God, just be all humans, and still have all of the benefits of God. But he can't, and he knows that, and he's at least honest enough to admit that.
Right. And I mean, that is what we all hope for, that cling to false idols. We want all the benefits of God, but on our terms or some other kind of terms. Yeah. It's the same, just it looks differently. And I love that about him, honestly, that he is honest enough to follow his arguments to logical conclusions. But I find the people on Twitter are not like that whatsoever, or on social media, or other people that aren't. I don't even know if it's educated, because a lot of them are educated. But for some reason, there is a real divide between reason and just knowing facts. And they will cite things, but then when they state an opinion, or they state a truth, and then you try to get them to carry the logic, it's impossible for them. I don't understand what that is. It must be federal vision.
It probably is. I mean, if there's one thing I know about federal vision, that it is that it's evil, and if this is evil as well, then there's a very good chance that it's also federal vision.
Yeah, it's permeated the science community. All right, so let's move to another topic, and I wanted to talk about this topic because it was something that was thrown out to me in a lot of ways as a fallacy, honestly. And during the talks about women preachers and pastors, and they were say things like, hey, why don't you call out men that are abusing women in church? Why aren't you like holding men accountable? To what I say is, we should. It's not an either or. I think if there is abuse in the church, then it needs to be addressed using the spheres of sovereignty, of addressing it from a church perspective when it's a sin issue, when there is the spiritual aspect to it, and if it needs to, bring the government in to punish for crimes they've broken. I'm not trying to let men off the hook at all. It's just a topic of conversation, but I think it's noteworthy to talk about as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let me say this. So I've heard similar arguments against me. Why aren't you saying this about me? Well, the reality is that people who say this kind of stuff often they just say it because that's the argument. That's the approved argumentation that they have, and they've seen other people say that, and they just say that because anyone who uses that against me is ignorant in the non, like, I'm not calling you stupid sense. So you just don't know anything about me. Because if you knew anything about me, you know that I take a harder stance on sexual abuse and sexual assault than almost anybody, including the people that make the charge against me. So I say, if somebody is accused, is convicted of sexual assault, rape, molestation, any of those things, and they're convicted on the evidence of 2 or more witnesses, they deserve the death penalty. So not jail time, not a slap on the wrist, not, you get off with a, warning, nothing, none of that. You die, you give up your life. So anyone who would say that to me, but doesn't also believe it's a death penalty offense has no argument. But the point is that this is the kind of way, this is a way to sort of, this is a way to distract, because no reasonable person would say a woman shouldn't preach and men should be able to abuse women.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some psychopath out there that says something like that, but it's very few people. And so this is a distraction mechanism, in my opinion. And yeah, it should be talked about. Yeah. If you're abusing women, if you're in, doing anything untoward towards women, like, you should be held accountable for that. Definitely. The fact that people abuse women has nothing to do with the fact that women shouldn't preach. They're two separate issues.
Right. And
it doesn't matter how many men you could find that have abused women. All of them should be held accountable, and still you shouldn't be able to preach. So it's a distraction. I honestly see that as a distraction, not in the sense that it's a distraction that shouldn't be addressed, but it's someone who doesn't want to actually talk about the issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was looking through articles and people were sharing them. And one of them that somebody I was debating with or talking with,
you debate
shared. Oh yeah. Yeah.
I understand.
Just the federal vision people. And that's my last joke of it today. It is from Church Leaders. And it was a guy named Gary Thomas. And he wrote this article that has so many issues with it. That from the first one to me is that he makes it sound like it is a problem that is prevalent through the whole church, and there are just men everywhere abusing women, taking advantage of them, and leveraging the value of the virtue of marriage to get away with it. And I don't see any facts or evidence in the article whatsoever.
Sure.
Which that's concerning to me, that an article under Church Leaders can be written and say that something is prevalent with no facts or basis whatsoever. And it is a serious topic, but we're getting into the territory now of the the Kavanaugh. Is George his first name? I'm just going to say Kavanaugh because I don't remember. where we should just believe everyone because of the seriousness of the charge. And this is serious. I'm not taking it lightly, but we need to be cautious about leveling these accusations to just justify an argument or to deflect and say everyone's getting abused because of whatever agenda you have. I don't know.
Well, so there's a couple things at play here because, on the one hand, and I'm looking at this article right now and I'm looking at his, bolded sections here. And every time he bolds something, it's so interesting because he just wants to go and say something. And listen, like nobody would argue that a husband has never abused a wife. Like, obviously there's some husbands out there that abuse their wives, and some of them profess Christ. So we can all agree with that. But I feel like there's this idea, a lot of times, Matt, that like you can just go and say that this is you can just go and basically lie about swaths of people and say this is a rampant issue and not really define what that means. This is too common. Never really define what that means, and basically put the scorn on the Church of God, the bride of Christ, and say this is the church's problem. Church too, this is churches. This is rampant in the church, and you think because you're not actually saying anything specific, you're not actually naming any names, you're not actually using any statistics, you think that that's not lying about people, but it is, because the fact of the matter is, if there's one Christian, let's just say, that abuses their wife, and it's a fact, they just did it, and you say that and say Christians have a problem, they abuse their wives, Christians need to be held accountable, and the reality is, like, it's just one person or a handful of people or a percentage of people, you're lying about Christians, you're lying about the church.
It's slandering.
If you say it's slander, it's bearing false witness is what it is.
Yeah.
And so we have to be in a situation where we can empathize with people that have been in these situations. Like I've had people in my own personal life, and this is a sad thing. I remember a brother came to me and he told me about some of my beliefs, some of my more theonomic beliefs, and he said, "Man, we're struggling. Me and my wife are struggling because her father was a theonomist and he was an abusive father or something like that." Mm-hmm. And like, I want to empathize with that. But what this guy was telling me was that like theonomy leads to abuse.
Right.
And that's slander. That's bearing false witness. That's obviously not true. But at the same time, I still do want to empathize with him.
Right. Definitely.
That's a serious and sad thing that needs to be addressed.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I agree with you that people feel too comfortable saying, well, I guess the Church of Christ is just a bunch of abusers, a bunch of racists, a bunch of sexists, a bunch of all this and that. Mm-hmm. And it's just preposterous, obviously.
It's terrible.
Imagine if somebody said, there's a lot of black people in Chicago, and there's a lot of murders in Chicago too. Blacks are just a bunch of murderers. Like, you would be like, are you crazy? What kind of a racist are you? You know what I mean? You, of course, rightfully so, you'd say that. Mm-hmm. But somehow people in the church think it's okay.
And I love taking an example. I don't know what it's exactly called, but taking an example to prove how absurd your logic is. But for some reason, that is something else that people can just not grapple with, because some people are going to hear that and be like, oh, AD, you're a racist. You hate black people. Like, no, we're not even making an equivalence between sexual abuse and race. We're just pointing out how absurd the argument is by using an example that's absurd.
Yeah.
All right. So now it's time for me to get in trouble. Let me get in trouble now.
I thought you got in trouble already, but hey.
Oh, no. Just wait for this one.
I'm waiting.
Watch, you probably just 100% agree with me. This will be interesting. And I shared the article for those of you watching live so you can follow along. And if you have any questions about the article or comments, feel free to put them in the chat. So in the very first sentence, which is in parentheticals, which is interesting. I don't usually see a leading sentence in an article in parentheticals.
That's not proper.
And it says, there are many men who live with abuse and could biblically, quote unquote, pursue a divorce as well. Now, the first red flag should probably be that biblically is in quotes. I don't know why that is in quotes. I don't know what he is referring to. But what concerns me is that he is saying abuse is a reason for divorce. And I don't know if that is true.
Okay.
Not that, and again, I am not saying that you should live with it, that you should tolerate it. Like, there's definitely times where you should get out of your home if you have an abusive, like, drunk husband or a father who's molesting your children, get them out. But I don't know if divorce is the answer biblically. And if I go to my trusty Bible and Jesus's words,
that's your first problem. Stop, Matt. That's your first problem.
I mean, I'm going to Jesus's words, quote unquote. I'm going to go to the Bible, quote unquote, according to this offer. But he says, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? Here we go with another creation, an evidence from creation that's, the culture hates. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they no longer are two, but one flesh. Whatever, therefore, God has joined together, let not man separate. And he stops there. And then he goes on, then he go on and they question him. Well, why did Moses command one to give a certificate of divorce and send to her? And he said, because of your hardness of your hearts, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives. But from the beginning, it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another, commits adultery. Now, I believe there was abuse back in the day as well, that Jesus has heard about it every once in a while.
Yeah.
But he doesn't give that as an excuse for divorce. And I'm not saying that you as an abused person should tolerate it, take it. I think you should go to your church if you are connected to a church, get your pastor involved, get your elders involved, go to the government if it is got to that point where your husband is breaking the law. But I don't know if divorce is the remedy. What say you? Come jump in the water. It's warm.
Oh man, I can't believe I'm laughing because this is a very serious issue, and this is not hypothetical for some people. So we need to keep that in mind. So there's one thing I want to say off the bat immediately, and that is that abuse, unfortunately, has turned into a weasel word. And what I mean by a weasel word is a word that has all kinds of meaning, and it can range from something very mild to something very serious. And so when I say sexual abuse, there are literally people out there that would say that something that could qualify for sexual abuse is a smile, or to hold the door for someone, or to say, hey, that's a nice dress. That could be a sexual abuse according to some people. And that sounds extreme. That sounds psychopathic, but it's the facts. You know what I mean? This is the truth. And at the same time, something that could be called sexual abuse is something very serious, a violent act. You know what I mean? And so we need to be careful when we read an article like this, that we're making sure that there is a very clear distinction of what is being talked about here. What is abuse biblically? And so I would say that, so let's just say, someone says, my husband's abusing me or my wife's abusing me. And you say, well, what are they doing? And it turns out that they're physically attacking you. They're sexually abusing you in the physical, like violent sense, you know what I mean? Or something like that. I think we need to, of course, draw a distinction there. And we could very easily say that that's an example of sexual immorality. You know what I mean? You're attacking your wife. But the reality is, like, some people would say, my husband's abusing me. And what was he doing? Well, he's calling me names. He's yelling at me. These are bad things too. These are sinful things. But does the Bible give you divorce as a biblical option for something like that? And I would agree with you that it doesn't seem to. You know what I mean? It doesn't seem to. So we want to be careful. We want to make distinctions. And does that mean you need to stay with them? Does that mean you need to, just accept it all and just be silent? No, but we're talking about a specific thing, divorce, right?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, this is something that we need to be careful with it, and it needs to be a case by case basis.
Yep, it definitely does. And again, I think it's just one of those things that's so drastic that we just take for granted. And it's such a big problem in our culture. Now,
Hmm.
I know they throw around, and I mean culture in our church culture specifically, but they throw around the number that 50% of all marriages end in divorce. And they say that's the same in the church. And looking at the statistics from what I've read, they're including people that have been married a second and third time, which statistically your rate of divorce goes up with every marriage. The likelihood you're going to get divorced with every marriage you have. I think it's like 80% on your third marriage or something.
Yeah. And obviously that makes perfect sense when you think about it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it totally does. Right. But still, I think we need to understand the seriousness of what divorce is. I mean, when we were reading this passage, when they are asking Jesus, is it lawful to get a divorce? He ends it with saying, let no man separate it. And that's it. And then they come back and say, but Moses gave us a certificate of divorce. So what are you saying? We can't get a divorce. Then he had expounded on it. Yeah, I like that's what I'm talking about, Cal. Is like there are like separations. You should be separated from abusive relationships. You should get your kids out. You should get yourself out. But there's a difference from complete divorce and separating. And I think a lot of it is emotional and spiritual too. Like where if you
also notice, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Matt.
No, please do.
I don't listen. If you also notice what Jesus does say is that, or what the people ask is that lawful to get divorced and then get married again. So in other words, it's like you separate from your abusive husband. That's one thing. And then you go and get married again. That's another thing. So it's like, okay, right. so, you guys couldn't reconcile. You were fighting like cats and dogs. It was bad for your kids. You guys just, for whatever reason, just couldn't figure out how to not argue. He was calling you names. He was calling you the C word. You were calling him this and that. Like, no, there was irreconcilable. Okay, so probably get away from each other.
Yep.
But you're still connected. Do not marry again. That's a separate issue. And so Jesus says very clearly that in that issue, if you want to get married again, like there's one thing that makes that legitimate. And it's not just like, I didn't like her.
Right. Yeah. Another problem that I had with this article is he says, I love marriage, even the struggles of marriage. Well, I don't love the struggles of marriage. No, but that's not the problem I have with it, which God can truly use to grow us and shape us. But I hate when God's daughters are abused. Wait, you like the struggles?
I don't like them, but...
Oh, okay. Thank you. I don't like them either. I know they're normal and they're part of a marriage. But he says this, I will never defend a marriage over a woman's emotional, spiritual, and physical health. And I looked at my wife and I read that to her and I'm like, hasn't there been times where you have been emotionally or spiritually damaged by me? I mean, honestly, like I'm a sinful person. We've been married over 8 years now. Like there's going to be times where I sin against her and that happens. Does that mean our marriage is illegitimate and she should divorce me over it? Like, where are the priorities and rankings here? Is it is that the determination of if a marriage is supposed to work? Is it if the woman's ever emotionally, spiritually, or physically abused?
Well, I mean, and again, let's just go with the parenthetical citation here that, well, men can be emotionally, abused or hurt too. The reality is like, yes, there is some situations where you will be hurt in any relationship, including a marriage. But yeah, so remember when I said weasel words? Like the problem with this article is there's too many weasel words. Emotional, spiritual, physical damage. Like, but what does this mean? You know what I mean? Like, if I'm having trouble with my wife, and my blood pressure is constantly raised, and it's it's also partially my fault, but it's also due to the fact that I'm married. Because when I was single, like I had not a care in the world. My blood pressure was fine. That's physical damage. I mean, it's serious physical damage. I mean, let's just be honest. Your blood pressure being jacked all the time will hurt you physically.
Yeah.
Over time. So therefore, I guess I can get divorced because I've got this blood pressure issue now. And it's like, well, what's the standard here, right? What is the standard here?
Yeah. It's not the Bible, because when you put the Bible in quotes, it's obviously not your standard anymore.
Right. The Bible in scare quotes basically tells you all you need to know about the article
Right.
before you even read it.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. And he's writing this out of a response to a conference, a women's conference he was at for some reason. And yeah, and he was apparently tons of people came up to him and said that they were being abused, which if they were, I mean, again, we're not making light of that. I'm glad they were telling somebody. But then he goes on this diatribe and he starts I'm just going to give him the benefit of the doubt. He's just speaking out of emotions, but he's saying things that are going to start twisting scripture. And when you start, and this is the same thing with like the women pastor argument, is you start justifying things outside of scripture and you start making divisions and truth claims that are not biblical, like not the real biblical, not the quote biblical, then things are just going to start falling apart and you're going to get into trouble. And you can't just do that. You have to be biblically based, even if you're having an emotional day and you're overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, what's interesting about this article is that he kind of seems to be a bit self-aware. He says, I know I'm ranting, but I don't think it was an accident that I was constantly stopped at that women's conference and forced to hear despicable story after despicable story. And so he kind of knows that he's being just completely emotional here. And on the one hand, I want to agree with him. Like here's something that he puts in bold, right? So obviously he wants you to read this. He says, Christians are more likely to have one-income families, making some Christian wives feel even more vulnerable. We have got to clean up our own house. We have got to say enough is enough. Like, yeah, I want to say enough is enough too. And that's true. Probably a lot more Christians have one-income families than non-Christians. Okay, that's probably true. And it says leading Christian wives to feel more vulnerable. Okay, I'm not going to deny maybe Christian wives feel more vulnerable. But what is this? All this is coming together. He's making an argument without making one. Basically saying that because Christian husbands are the one-income family, they feel like they have the right to abuse their wives. That's the argument behind these words. Like he's not saying it, but this is the point.
Yeah.
We have to say enough is enough because there's just too many one-income families. Like, what? And he admits it. He's ranting. Yeah. He's not making much sense. That's what that means, ranting, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, no. And I love what you're saying. Like they're using Weasley words. They're using emotions to leverage something. Oh, it is terrible to be abusive. And these poor women, we have to respond by doing something. And this is just, the tactics used here are so similar and so many other different types of arguments as well. And I hope we're starting to see a pattern with how the Bible is being attacked and marriage is being attacked in these biblical institutions. It's Weasley words. It's emotional and it's not biblical. It's
one way to diagnose this is just to say, okay, so is anything here, objectively worse if it was a Christian family or a non-Christian family? Or is the abuse more acceptable if it's a one-income family or a two-income family? Is there any reason to say these things except to essentially slander the bride of Christ? That's the point. Like every Christian is against abuse. Does it make it worse if the person abusing is a professed believer or a professed Satanist? The abuse is the same. You know what I mean? Right. We can hold the Christian to a higher standard, but yet the penalties are the same. Like it doesn't matter whether you're a Satanist or a Christian. If you sexually abuse someone, you deserve the death penalty.
Yeah.
Okay. So we can hold you to a higher standard, but let's stop pretending that this is especially an issue in the church. That's a false thing. That's a false statement. This whole idea that the divorce rates are the same exact thing in the Church of Christ than they are in the general community, that's a false statement as well. Like, let's stop lying about the bride. That's all I care about. Like, let's stop lying about the bride of Christ and let's punish abusers according to the standard of the Bible. That's what I want to do.
Amen. I'm so glad you're on this show because you say such great things like that, and it really makes up for my, fumbling around.
Yeah, man.
But it's serious. And just to close out this article, because it started so strong, it's going to end really strong too. He says, I think God wanted me to see the breadth and depth of what is going on, and in this case, perhaps to be his voice.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Another red flag. Right. And again, this is a theme with people is We are going to do what feels right. We are going to lobby for and argue for the things that we value because God is speaking through me. It's really dangerous.
Well, and not only is he speaking through you, but he's speaking through you in a way that he didn't speak already. And it's like, okay, so fine. Like, so you're telling me that there's all these other reasons that you can legitimately divorce. Not only that, but you're kind of disparaging the Bible by putting it in scare quotes. So, like, this is the thing, like I could probably amen, 60, 70% of what you're saying here. Cause I mean, you're not really going out on a limb by saying men shouldn't abuse women.
Right.
And so I can do that, but yeah, I think we made our point.
Yeah, definitely. So another thing that was actually surprising and kind of refreshing, I'm not going to lie, Joe Biden got denied communion, or since this is at a Catholic church by a priest, Holy Communion, in South Carolina because of his abortion stance. And this is interesting for a few angles, but first of all, thank you very much for
that's
that's
federal vision right there.
That's federal vision. Yeah. Oh man. It's in the Catholic Church too. It's everywhere.
But go ahead.
I was just going to say, so I want to know is this priest going to hold all the Democrats that are Catholics too, who are advocating for abortion?
Great question. So let me just say two things. So if he doesn't, that would be slightly disappointing, but I would still support what he did with Biden because symbolically it's very powerful. But I would say good on him. I mean, honestly, I would be way more likely to accept the profession of faith of Catholics. And I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, whatever. I don't care. If they actually did, do stuff like this, because there's a lot of nominal Catholics out there that don't really care what Christ has to say about anything. Mm-hmm. And there are some Catholics that I know that do care very much about what Christ has to say about things. But this has been a blight on not only the Catholic Church, but churches in general, where they just are totally cool. Well, you think babies should be allowed to be killed and you're promoting it and you're going to help it happen as a magistrate of the civil government? No problem. Good on them. Good on them.
Definitely. And then my next thought was, why aren't we hearing about this in our churches too? Where are the Protestants? Where is the Reformgelicals, the evangelicals? Why isn't this happening? It's not even being preached on, let alone kicking people out of the church.
All right, say it. All right. I saw shared a podcast from Jamar Tisby and his little band of idiots.
Federal visions.
They're totally federal vision. Yeah. Anyway, from The Witness, and basically talking about abortion, and it's a train wreck. It's an absolute train wreck, and puts forward these weird things that says like, well, if you're black, you shouldn't vote Republican because that's white way to deal with abortion. We've got our own morality here. Like if you're not confident enough in your blackness to have your own black morality on abortion, then you're just colonized. And I'm obviously exaggerating about what they said, but that's essentially what it boils down to. And so number one, a lot of Democrats don't go to churches where that would even be an option. It would even be on the table. And I'm not saying the black church is for abortion in every instance, but the reality is that black voters vote Democrat, and that there's a reason for that. You know what I mean? I don't know what that reason is, but there's obviously something going on there where they don't think it's that big of a deal to promote killing your kid in the womb.
Mm-hmm. And statistically, the black culture is the ones who do the killing the most.
White Christians that are Democrats also, for some reason, don't think it's that big of a deal. Right? There's other bigger deals, economic equality and equity. That's much more important. Like I don't get it, but that's the reality. So if you vote Democrat, that's something that you're saying, like killing kids. That's lower priority than something else. I don't know what that something else is, but it doesn't matter. So, and then the conservative churches, for some reason, have bought into this lie. So we're not off the hook. Don't get me wrong. Like we vote Republican, but we're not off the hook because somehow the idea that it's okay to promote and vote for people that want to make it a fundamental human right to kill children is not really like a damnable heresy. That's not that big a deal either. So we shouldn't withhold communion from you. And so if you're not withholding, I mean, excommunication, it's about communion, right? It's about having that fellowship. It's about having that, Lord's Supper, participating in the body of the church. So if you're not willing to excommunicate someone who thinks it is cool and should be promoted to make it a fundamental human right to kill children, what would you excommunicate someone for?
Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, you go to a black church, a white church, like most churches don't do this. So good on that Catholic, because most Catholic churches don't do it either. And there's really no logical reason that they don't.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't.
Yeah.
They don't care.
They don't love either, because that's a form of loving people. And the answer to your question of, if you don't kick them out for this, what do you kick them out for? And the answer is nothing, because there's no church discipline.
Well, you do though. Then this is where this is going to come full circle. It's almost, we've been at this for 50 minutes. So we're going to come full circle, because we have upside down morality. Everything is topsy-turvy. Everything's inverted. And so what you do kick them out for is saying like the N-word or something like that, because that's way worse. I mean, you say the N-word, even out of context, like Papa John, he said he got kicked out of his own company for saying the N-word out of context. Like he wasn't calling someone that. He just said someone said something like this, something like that.
Right.
And he gets kicked out of his own company. That's excommunicatable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You don't think that slavery was the worst evil ever? That might be excommunicatable. Being federal vision, that's excommunicatable. Definitely.
It definitely is. In all cases.
Double excommunicatable. So, like these are the things that matter, because we have a morality that's inverted. It's upside down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the reason that the church suffers with upside down morality, just like the atheist Richard Dawkins, is because we both have idolatry problems.
Yeah.
We're suffering, or we're sacrificing to idols. And again, what better reason, or what reason is there if not for this, to purify the church, is to kick out people that are sacrificing to idols. If you read through the Old Testament once in a while, like I do nowadays, being, with my Reform folk and all,
every so often,
it is a constant battle with the children of Israel to be removing high places, to removing idols. And for some reason, we just said, screw it. We'll just not talk about it. We'll not discipline it. We will tolerate it, just like the children of Israel did. And it didn't work out too well for them.
No. And I think, listen, I'll say this too. I don't think I've said that many controversial things about like race and ethnicity, but some people think I have. I think I'm pretty mild when it comes to that, but a lot of people think I have. But I'll tell you, I mean, as much as people think I say controversial things about that, there's two issues that have been super controversial that I've talked about. One of them is effeminacy. That's the number one for sure. I get more flack for that than anything. The second thing,
true,
probably right. The second thing, though, is a while back I said something about excommunicating people that vote Democrat. Like that's what we should do. You know what I mean? In most instances, not every instance. Someone has like a nuanced argument or something like very careful. I could understand that, but I don't think most people do. I think they just don't think it's that big a deal, this abortion thing, and people that don't think that abortion is a big deal, and you teach them that it is, and you teach them why it is, and they still don't care, they should be excommunicated. Yeah. They should, and it doesn't matter what you think is more important. So like if you talk about it with someone and over time they said, well, I think that the Republicans are racist and that's bad too. And it's like, well, yeah, but like, so what you're telling me is like, you'd rather someone kill a kid than call you, a filthy Puerto Rican. Like I'm Puerto Rican, so I'm allowed to say it. Like if that's you, if you think that it's better to be called or it's worse to be called like a spick or something than for someone to kill a baby. Like, you're twisted.
Yeah.
I'd rather be in bondage and slavery. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but this is the reality. Like, I'd rather be in bondage than for it to be okay to murder children in this country.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather be your slave than allow that to continue. I'm not a hero for that, because that's a very obvious moral choice.
Yeah. For those who aren't worshiping idols and having their morality skewed.
I don't want to be in bondage either, by the way. Just don't get any ideas, you sickos that watch us.
I was going to drive up there and throw you in the back of my truck and come back down to the South.
We can do both. Like, we can have both, right? We don't have to be racist, and we don't have to have abortion, right? That's okay.
I don't know. That's a little too far for us Federal Vision folk.
That's true. It is evil. Very evil.
Yeah. So the last thing I wanted to hit on this article, and I think it will close this, is I want to ask, is it the responsibility of a pastor or a priest in this case to withhold communion? And I want to go to the text to read first of what I know is the best text for communion. I want to go to 1 Corinthians 11. I want to pass it where it talks about the husband being the head of the wife. I want to pass it about the head coverings. I want to pass the part where women are created for man. I don't want to talk about that stuff because that would be a little controversial, but I want to just read a little part of 1 Corinthians 11, 27 through 34. Whoever therefore eats bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty concerning the body and the blood of the Lord. Let a person examine himself, and then so eat of the bread and drink of the cup. For anyone who eats and drinks without discerning the body eats and drinks judgment on himself. That is why many of you are weak and ill, and some have died. But if we judged ourselves truly, we would not be judged. But when we are judged by the Lord, we are disciplined so that we may not be condemned along with the world. And my question is, although I love what the priest did from a church discipline perspective, he drew a line. He said, like, you are not part of us if you are supporting the murder of children. It's idolatry. It's all of those things. But is it really his role to withhold communion?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. So here's the reality. So I think that one of the roles of the spheres, we talked about the spheres of authority,
Mm-hmm.
Your family sphere, your government, and then the church. One of the spheres of authority that God has given the church is, who's in the kingdom and who's out of the kingdom, right? The keys of the kingdom. So whatever you bind on earth shall have been bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall have been loosed in heaven. This is God telling the church that you have authority over who's in and who's out of the kingdom of heaven in some degree. He gives that to us. And so I think that participating in the body of Christ, communion, that is an essential part of that. That's one of the primary parts of that. And so the church has the authority to say, well, look, you're not in the kingdom of heaven, so you can't participate in this. Mm-hmm. This is not, you can't eat of the body of Christ. If you did, that would be judgment on you, and I'm responsible for you, so I'm not going to do that. So yeah, I would say that a pastor has that authority, an elder has that authority, the church has that authority.
That's an interesting and really good argument, honestly. I was going to try to give you some pushback, but I think that is a great case for that, and I'm kind of on board with it. Like, as an evangelical, I grew up with we would have communion, and the pastor would say something about, you need to be a believer, but you're welcome to come if you are. Which was interesting to me and maybe speaks to the importance of church membership, which, again, I've never been a church member, which might be crazy to some people. But,
that is crazy to me.
Yeah, the evangelicals, they don't really do that.
Yeah.
And my church I'm going to now, they are a Reformed church, and they have church membership, and I'm totally intrigued. Like, when are they going to make the pitch to me?
Yeah.
Where do I go in the back room? Like, what happens here? But that might be a great case for it with applying communion and also church discipline and those things as well.
Well, I'll tell you what. So this is it's in my opinion, I'm a Reformed guy. It's important. I think. So I go to a Baptist church right now because there's really not a Presbyterian church anywhere close to me that I could go to. But
do they know that you're Presbyterian?
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
And so the pastor of this church, he's a Reform guy, and he very very strong believer in membership and stuff like that. So I might be moving in the next 4 months or so. So I wasn't going to pursue membership, but he said, you know what, if you're going to be coming here, I'd like to be helping you. I'd like to be responsible for you. I'd like to, and so you should become a member, even if it's only going to be for 4 months. And so this past Sunday, my family became members of the church. And so it's important because, when it comes to communion, not everyone fences the table. That's what it's called, fencing the table for believers only, taking responsibility for who's taking it. Not everyone does that, but there's got to be some kind of standard there. You know what I mean? Like something that protects people that are unbelievers from taking that communion, because if somebody takes it in an unworthy manner, that's a dangerous thing. And so the pastor should be responsible enough to make sure there's something in place there that protects unbelievers, people that would take it in an unworthy manner, from not taking it. And so I'm not telling you, I'm not going to say what people should do. I'm not a pastor, so I'm not going to tell you what to do, but there's got to be some kind of standard there besides just, whatever. Come on in. You know what I mean?
Nick made a good point in the comments and talking about that in the Biden was on record for a proponent of abortion. And same true if people that are living with someone else besides their spouse. That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, if I was a pastor, and I have been in the past, and I knew that there was someone, let's just say it's something like that, or say it's something that's, something similar where it's like an open sin and everyone kind of knows it, and I knew about it and they just didn't care. It would be a detriment to them to continue to take that communion. And so I would have to say something.
Yeah. And this kind of goes along with what you're saying. And this is kind of cool. I didn't even know that you guys listening can ask questions. I thought I had to ask the questions and you got to answer them. But Nick asked, would the person giving the communion have responsibility then for holding the sacrament sacred? And that's a tongue twister for us evangelicals. So what say you, Presbyterian Baptists?
I can't read the question here, and I didn't understand what you asked. So say it again.
Goodness. Would the person giving communion have responsibility for holding the sacrament sacred? So the person issuing fencing, as you called it. Yeah. Do they have a responsibility then?
Yeah, definitely. I would say so. I mean, it's the same kind of responsibility that a pastor would have for preaching the right thing. You know what I mean? Like they need to teach what the Bible says and not their opinions on what the Bible says. Like they have a responsibility when it comes to preaching, and when it comes to church discipline, and definitely I would say that would apply to communion as well.
And then, okay, so I have a question, and I know we're long, and I apologize, but hey, we don't have another show coming in after us, so who cares? My question is, why don't we have feast anymore for communion? Like that was a big deal. Like people would be hogging the food, they would be drinking the wine and getting drunk while people were starving, and they were neglecting people.
This is
can we go back to that?
Okay, Matt. So I'm going to say something to you, and I hope you don't take it the wrong way.
Okay.
I'm not going to answer the question, but what I will say is this. When I was an evangelical, I had a very similar question. And so I can only hope that you're on the same trajectory as me. And you will be a Westminster believing person in a matter of a few months.
It took you months. You asked this question.
No, but it's a good question, though. It really is a good question because this is an aspect of modern Presbyterianism, modern church that does seem to be a bit of a tradition where it's not a feast, it's not a meal for most churches. It's a tradition, and I'm not saying it's a bad tradition, but what I am saying is that it's interesting that we're okay with this just being this wasn't the way it was. We didn't practice it the way we practice it now back then when it was instituted. And it's a great question. I want to
not going to answer it.
Well, I don't have an answer. That's why I'm not going to answer it. I still do it that way. And when I was a pastor, I did it that way too. And I don't know. I mean, I had a pastor once that said that one reason why we don't do it is because it kind of went sideways, clearly, because in Corinthians or whatever, it was talking about how people were getting drunk and stuff and, going in and just having like a party, and like that didn't seem like much of an answer to me, because I was like, okay, well, people shouldn't get drunk, but it should be kind of like a feast, right? Like it's a feast,
right?
That didn't seem like much of an answer at all. Like, doesn't that seem like more reason to do it?
Yeah, and it doesn't even seem like Paul's shutting it down with it going sideways.
Right. It's not like he said don't do it anymore. He just said don't get drunk anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And let the poor people come and eat too. Like that's what he was basically saying.
Right.
I don't know. I have no answer. That's why I can't answer it. But it's a great question, and it just reminds me of the way I used to think. I'm not. Like I said, I hope you don't take it the wrong way. Like you're like way behind me. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that like when I was an evangelical, these are the questions that started to lead me to take the Bible super seriously.
Uh-huh. Well, like honestly, as an evangelical, I want to. And these are questions I've had for a while. And in fact, I have a lot more questions about church service and aligning them to the Bible that I've been trying to get to fit into the show, but things just keep coming up and I don't get to fit it in, because I think that we should be doing things a little differently along these same lines. Like we should be having feast. So maybe we'll get into it next week.
I'm surprised we didn't talk about Kanye, but kind of glad. Maybe we can talk about it next week. And yeah, I think that these are great topics actually. And they're kind of a little bit off like some of the pop culture type stuff, which could be a good break every now and then to talk about stuff like that. Because there are answers to these. And as you might imagine, our favorite federal visionist, Doug Wilson, has thought about this very much, and he's got some excellent stuff about this kind of thing, exactly what the church service is all about and how it should be ordered and stuff like that. It's interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is really interesting. Well, thank you everyone for holding on late who's been watching us live. I really appreciate the questions and interactions. It makes the show so much better when we have real-time audience feedback. It's really great. So thank you for that. If you haven't, go over, subscribe to our YouTube, to our Twitter, Facebook, Reformgelical, share our stuff, tag somebody who you think is Federal Vision, and we will call them out. For AD and myself, thank you for joining Reformgelical, where the Reformed and Evangelicals meet. We'll talk to you next time. God bless.
Take care.